The night before Elizabeth Carter's wedding, she woke up beside the man she believed she could trust with her entire life. Daniel was asleep beside her. The room was quiet. The wedding was only hours away. Her dress was hanging in the next room. The flowers had already been delivered. Hundreds of guests were expected to arrive the following morning. Elizabeth should have been the happiest woman in the world. But then Daniel's phone lit up. She wasn't supposed to touch it. She knew that. But when she saw the message on the screen, something inside her told her that she needed to look. The message said, "She still doesn't know the truth about you." Elizabeth froze. Before she could even process what she had read, another message appeared. "You promised me she would never find out." Her hands began to shake. Who was this woman? What truth was Daniel hiding? And why had he chosen Elizabeth to marry? Before we dive deeper into this story, my friend, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with love, secrets, betrayal, and unexpected twists, please like this video, subscribe to The Shadowed Heart, and share this story with someone who loves a good emotional story. Now, let's continue. The following morning, Elizabeth stood in front of the mirror, staring at herself. She was 31 years old, successful, beautiful, independent, and tomorrow, she was supposed to become Mrs. Daniel Hayes. For months, she had imagined this moment. She imagined walking down the aisle. She imagined seeing Daniel waiting for her. She imagined hearing him promise that he would love her forever. But now, all she could think about was that message. "She still doesn't know the truth about you." Elizabeth looked toward the bedroom door. Daniel was downstairs preparing for the wedding. She wanted to confront him, but something stopped her. She needed to know the truth first, so she waited. That evening, when Daniel went to take a shower, Elizabeth picked up his phone. Her heart was beating faster than it ever had. She unlocked it and opened the conversation. There were hundreds of messages. Some were recent, others were several years old. The name at the top of the conversation was Sophia. Elizabeth didn't recognize the name. She started reading. At first, the messages looked innocent. Then she found photographs. Daniel standing beside Sophia. Daniel holding Sophia's hand. Daniel and Sophia sitting together at a restaurant. There were photographs from vacations, birthdays, celebrations. Elizabeth felt sick, but then she saw something that made her completely freeze. There was an old photograph of Daniel standing beside a much older man. Elizabeth knew that man. It was her father. Her father had died 8 years earlier. Elizabeth stared at the photograph. She zoomed in. There was no mistake. It was Daniel, standing beside her father. But Daniel had never told her that he knew him. Not once. When Daniel came back into the room, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. Elizabeth was sitting on the edge of the bed. His phone was in her hand. She looked at him. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the phone. She simply asked, "How did you know my father?" Daniel stopped moving. His face changed. For several seconds, he said nothing. Elizabeth stood up. "You knew my father before you knew me." Daniel lowered his head. Elizabeth's voice began to tremble. "Did you come into my life because of him?" Daniel finally looked at her. And then he said the words that shattered everything. "Yes." Elizabeth felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her. "What do you mean, yes?" Daniel sat down. He knew he couldn't hide anymore. Years earlier, his family had suffered because of Elizabeth's father. Daniel's father had owned a successful company. But after a business dispute involving Elizabeth's father, everything collapsed. His family lost their company. They lost their home. And Daniel's father died believing that the man responsible had destroyed everything he had built. Daniel spent years believing the same thing. He wanted revenge. He wanted Elizabeth's father to pay. But Elizabeth's father was already dead. So Daniel decided to find his daughter, Elizabeth. At first, his plan was simple. He would get close to her. He would make her trust him. And eventually, he would find the secrets her father had left behind. But something happened that Daniel never expected. He fell in love with her. Daniel remembered the first night they met. It was at a charity event. Elizabeth wasn't interested in his money. She didn't know about his family's history. She didn't even know who he was. She simply smiled at him. They talked for hours. And for the first time in years, Daniel forgot about revenge. He forgot about the past. He forgot about Elizabeth's father. He only thought about Elizabeth. Their relationship grew. They traveled together. They laughed together. They cried together. Daniel began to realize that the woman he had originally planned to use had become the person he couldn't imagine losing. But there was one problem. He had never told her the truth. And every day he remained silent, the secret became heavier. Then there was Sophia. Sophia had been Daniel's former fiancée. She knew about his past. She knew about his original plan. And she knew that Daniel had once promised her a future. But Daniel had changed. He had fallen completely in love with Elizabeth. Sophia couldn't accept it. She watched Daniel prepare to marry another woman. And she became desperate. That's why she sent the messages. She wanted Elizabeth to discover the truth. But Sophia didn't know something. Daniel had already abandoned his plan for revenge. Months earlier, he had decided that Elizabeth mattered more than revenge. He wanted to tell Elizabeth everything. He just didn't know how. The next morning, there was a knock at Elizabeth's door. When she opened it, Sophia was standing outside. Elizabeth stared at her. This was the woman from Daniel's phone. Sophia looked nervous. Elizabeth wanted to close the door. But Sophia said, "Please, you need to hear this." Elizabeth allowed her inside. They sat across from each other. Elizabeth asked, "Why did you send those messages?" Sophia looked down. "Because Daniel was going to marry you without telling you the truth." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Sophia continued, "But Daniel isn't the person you should be afraid of." Elizabeth frowned. "Then who should I be afraid of?" Sophia looked directly into her eyes and said, "Your father?" Elizabeth couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her father had always been her hero. He had protected her. He had provided for her. He had taught her everything she knew. She couldn't imagine him being responsible for destroying another family. But Sophia had brought documents. Old business records, letters, photographs, legal papers. Elizabeth spent hours going through them. And slowly, the truth began to appear. Her father had made decisions years earlier that had destroyed Daniel's family. He had hidden what happened from Elizabeth. Daniel's revenge had not come from nowhere. There really had been a terrible history between their families. Elizabeth closed her eyes. Everything she believed about her family was changing, and everything she believed about Daniel was changing too. Daniel had lied to her, but he had also genuinely fallen in love with her. That afternoon, Daniel came to see Elizabeth. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't make excuses. He simply stood in front of her and said, "I lied to you." Elizabeth looked at him through tears. "I know. I came into your life for the wrong reason. I know. But somewhere along the way, you became the only thing in my life that was real." Elizabeth looked away. Daniel continued, "I stopped wanting revenge a long time ago. Then why didn't you tell me?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was afraid that the truth would make me lose you," Elizabeth whispered. "You should have trusted me with the truth." Daniel nodded. "I know." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel said, "I love you, Elizabeth, but I understand if you can never forgive me." And he walked away. The wedding day arrived. The flowers were ready. The guests had arrived. The musicians were waiting. Everyone expected Elizabeth to walk down the aisle. But Elizabeth had spent the entire night thinking. She loved Daniel. There was no doubt about that. But love wasn't enough. Trust had been broken, and she couldn't simply pretend that nothing had happened. Then the doors opened. Elizabeth appeared in her wedding dress. Everyone stood. Daniel looked at her. Their eyes met. Elizabeth slowly walked toward him. She reached the altar. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she looked directly into his eyes. "I know everything." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Elizabeth removed her wedding ring. She placed it in his hand. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did." Daniel looked down. "But I know one thing," Elizabeth continued. "I would rather hear the truth from the man I love than live happily with a lie." Daniel began to cry. Elizabeth took a deep breath. "If you really love me, don't ask me to marry you today." The room became completely silent. "Give me a reason to trust you again." Then Elizabeth turned around and walked away. The wedding was over. 6 months passed. Elizabeth heard nothing from Daniel. There were no flowers, no phone calls, no desperate messages, nothing. She worked. She traveled. She tried to rebuild her life. And slowly, the pain began to fade. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. There was no expensive gift, no flowers, no request for forgiveness, just a simple envelope with her name written on it. Elizabeth opened it. It was from Daniel. He wrote, "I spent 3 years searching for revenge. Then I spent 1 year learning what love really means. I know I hurt you. I know an apology cannot erase what I did, and I know I have no right to ask you to come back." Elizabeth wiped a tear from her cheek. Then she reached the final paragraph. "If you never come back, I'll understand, but I'll spend the rest of my life becoming worthy of the woman I once tried to deceive." Elizabeth slowly folded the letter. She held it against her heart. For the first time in months, she smiled. She didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know whether she could ever completely trust Daniel again, but she knew one thing. The truth had hurt. The truth had destroyed the wedding. The truth had broken two hearts. But sometimes, the truth is the only thing that gives love a chance to survive, because some hearts are broken by lies, and others are healed by the truth. If this story touched your heart, don't just leave without saying something. Tell me in the comments, would you forgive Daniel if you were Elizabeth? Would you give him another chance? Or would you walk away forever? I really want to know what you would do. And if you enjoyed this story, please like this video, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to The Shadowed Heart. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Because here at The Shadowed Heart, every heart has a story, and every story has a secret. I'll see you in the next one.